weather enthusiasts. I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a bit to discuss with Invest 98L. We have a lot of uncertainty to untangle, and we have a lot of unknowns that we need to figure out. So, we're going to be talking quite a bit about what's going on today. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get right into it and just dive right into the data because we have quite a bit to discuss and a lot to untangle. So here's the situation that we have for you guys right here. This is Invest 98L. This is as of the 2 a.m. advisory, so I am recording this pretty early in the morning. So please do keep that in mind. This is subject to change, but here's the situation that we have for you right here. A tropical wave located over the eastern Caribbean Sea, a few hundred miles west of the Windward Islands, is producing a large area of poorly organized showers and thunderstorms. Recent satellite-derived wind data indicate that the disturbance continues to lack a closed circulation, although it is producing 30 to 40 mile per hour winds to the north and east of the wave axis. The system is expected to quickly move westward at 20 to 25 miles per hour, which should limit significant development during the next day or so. Thereafter, environmental conditions are expected to be more conducive for development as the wave slows down over the central Caribbean Sea, and a tropical depression is likely to form during the middle to later part of this week. Regardless of development, heavy rainfall and gusty winds are expected to continue along portions of the Windward and Leeward Islands this morning. 30% chance in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 7 days, similar to what we saw last night. So that's what we have from the National Hurricane Center for you guys. And another thing I'm noticing is this area of interest is pretty much to the south. It's pretty much south of where you would normally see from an NHC potential area that they have marked here. It's pretty much on the southern part of the guidance right here that you have highlighted right here. That's going to be very intriguing to see if that continues, and if it does, how long that will continue, and that's something we're going to want to pay attention to here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But going ahead and going back to satellite imagery, here's what we have with Invest 98L. Invest 98L is producing a lot of convection, but it is mostly sheared to the eastern side of that axis right here. You can kind of see it quite well, actually, because you have your center of rotation pretty much, I'd say, right about, let me go ahead and pause this last frame, right about here, I would say, and a lot of the convection is just kind of hung on to the eastern side of it right here. I talked about this on stream last night, but there are 3 main inhibitors that are preventing quick development from the system right away. You have number 1, the forward speed of the system. This is moving at 20 to 25 miles per hour, pretty much getting this in its own way as it moves north of the ABC Islands and as it moves into the central Caribbean Sea. That's the first thing that's inhibiting it. The second thing that's inhibiting it is there is 30 to 40 knots of wind shear that the system is running into. So on top of its forward speed, it's running into even more wind shear on top of that, and that's not at the surface either. That's pretty much deep layer shear, 30 to 40 knots that is, and that's expected to persist for the next 48 to 72 hours. And the third thing inhibiting a potential development, at least early on, is this water vapor imagery. Looking at this right here, there is a dry air slot over here that is still going to be bothering the system. Yes, it's getting mixed out a little bit more as more convection starts to fire off to the west, but that's going to be pretty persistent as it moves south of Puerto Rico, as it moves north the ABC Islands, and as it moves south of the Dominican Republic and Haiti now, as that dry air slot's starting to get more pronounced to the west of it over there. So that's why I'm confident in saying that at least for the next couple of days, at least, maybe the next 60 hours, we're not going to see much tropical development with this system. Am I saying that this is going to be developing at all? I'm not saying that's not going to do that. But what I am saying is based on what we have right now, it's not going to be doing it on the very short-term side of things, like some hurricane models are advocating for. So that's what you have over here with satellite imagery. Here's the current storm information we have for you. This is what we have for 98L. Its current location is 12.7 degrees north, 65.1 degrees west. That was as of quite a while ago by the time you see this. So this is actually even a few hours ago from the time we recorded this video. But one thing we've noticed is this area of interest is not moving to the north. If it's moving due west still at this current point in time, at the time of recording this video. So it's mainly staying on the southern end of the guidance that we saw from the NHC, and that is going to be very interesting to see how that pans out, because the further south that stays, the better of a chance that as this stays pretty weak, it's going to end up missing the trough until it gets to potentially the Western Caribbean Sea, as we've seen with some models. So that's going to be something that you're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. But here's what we have for you. Maximum sustained winds are at 30 knots or 35 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure is 1,009 millibars at this current point. Radius of maximum winds is 80 nautical miles, mainly to the east into the north. So that's what we have for you right here. We can go ahead now and show you just now the kind of crazy model wars, as Alex Baller from my tropical team has really kind of talked about. Here's what we had at 0Z. We talked about this last night on stream. Here is your track guidance that you had right here. You pretty much had a lot of these models pretty much moving towards the west, and then potentially stalling out, and then making that turn towards potentially the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, or Haiti, especially compared to what we saw previously, where this system was initially expected to enter the Western Caribbean before making that turn. I talked about this on stream. I did not trust these models at all. I still do not trust these models, because these models, mind you, you need to understand that the way these hurricane runs operate is they already think that, at least with fundamentals, that this is already a closed low, and this is already a tropical cyclone, which is why when I saw the intensity guidance for the 0Z right here, actually I'm pulling this up, this is why I was called foul on it, because it was expecting it to be a tropical storm in 24 hours. That's pretty much 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight when that would be. That's not going to happen at this current point in time. Yes, it is a strong tropical wave, don't get me wrong, but it's poorly organized, it's battling shear, it's battling its forward speed, and it's battling dry air. It's not going to develop likely for at least the next 48 hours. So that's kind of why I called foul on that. I did not like the initial intensity on this right here. And now looking at the 6C models, things continue to get more interesting right here. A lot of the models kind of had that making that turn more so towards the north, and then shifting back to the west now towards Cuba. That's going to be interesting. So this is pretty much a situation where we have what we like to call model wars right here, where we have no idea what exactly is going to be happening. Every single model compared to the other is all over the place. We have some models hitting the Dominican Republic and Haiti. I will say the Dominican Republic is probably less likely at this current point in time, considering, number one, its current location, and number two, in order for it to turn, especially with the forward speed it has, it would have to do it in the next 36 hours at this current point, and that's not going to happen based on what I'm seeing with these model runs. They all agree that it's going to be moving west to west-northwest for the next 48 hours. After that is where things get a lot trickier. So that's kind of what you're dealing with right here with these forecast tracks right here. And another thing to note, too, is some of these models do not seem the most realistic, in my opinion. First of all, you have these some of these start turning, some of these start stalling out and pretty much staying there for days as well. It's this messy situation we're going to want to watch. But one model that has been consistent is the European, and we'll show you that as well. But that's your track models. Here's your intensity guidance, which, by the way, I am taking once again with a massive grain of salt, because first of all, look at the halves B. The halves B wants this to be a Category 4 hurricane and just absolutely exploding. Now, in terms of its track intensity, if you kind of look at it right there, it is theoretically plausible given the conditions in the Caribbean after 72 hours out, but there's a lot of these scenarios that I really do not like. For example, they're wanting the system, the majority of the models want the system to be a tropical storm in the next 24 hours. That's likely not going to happen. It's likely not going to develop today. Very unlikely it will. as a matter of fact, because of the conditions I just highlighted. But what I will say is this is a very interesting spread that we have for you right here that we're going to want to pay attention to. A lot of them get up to hurricane strength, some category 2, especially the H wharf. Then the halves B just blowing it up to major hurricane strength. The point this model spread is trying to make for you guys, though, is this is a very high ceilinged event. You have a particularly high ceiling because of the warm waters and the OHC. And once that wind shear starts to drop in the next 3 days or so, that's when the system's going to start potentially going off. And that's when I would say development is what is the most likely at that current point. Once that shear and dry air falls off, then you're going to have your chance for development. And from then on out, we'll have to see how this system will ultimately pan out. But with that being said, we can kind of look at some other operational models just to kind of show you what the spread on this is like. Although the European has remained the most consistent model out of all of this, the European consistently has had the system entering the Western Atlantic, not the Western Atlantic, the Western Caribbean, stalling over there, and then making a beeline towards Cuba and the Bahamas. And that's where I'm personally leaning on right now, mainly because of the steering currents and the fact that this is going to remain a weak system. That's going to be moving pretty quickly for the next day or so as it moves kind of south of the Dominican Republic, moves just north of the ABC Islands. Once it moves west of the DR, it's not going to really have a chance of impacting there. And the 6C models have definitely reflected that quite a bit more, I will say. But this is the European model that we have pulled up for you right here. System remains very disorganized for the next 3 days or so. It does end up developing it, I would say, potentially by about 66 hours out. So that's October 22nd in the afternoon, potentially, where this closes off. And then you have the system stalling out in the central Caribbean Sea and then starting to move slowly to the west and remaining relatively weak, like a weak tropical storm, a pretty broad tropical storm for 1,003 millibars as the system slowly moves into the Western Caribbean. And then after about a week or so, you have this system starting to quickly organize and quickly intensify as the European starts to potentially head towards Cuba. It kind of makes a slow approach towards Nicaragua before stalling over some very warm waters and very high ocean heat content as it gets to a 972 millibar system by October 28th. And then starting to head towards Cuba as a major hurricane. The European 0Z wants the system to be a 929 millibar system. That is a high-end Category 4 hurricane at least that is going to be heading towards Cuba. And if that scenario holds, that is going to cause some very big problems and it'd be a very big concern for Jamaica. Number one, as they're going to potentially get some strong winds and heavy rainfall with this, as well as much of central Cuba, and number two, and the Bahamas, as this is still forecast to be a major hurricane as it heads towards those islands right there, and then potentially Bermuda could be in the line of fire. That has been the scenario that's been the most consistent at this current point. The rest of the models have been kind of all over the place in terms of its track, and that's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to. Right there. So that's your European model, the latest 0Z guidance right there. The 12Z guidance, taking a quick gander at that, similar situation. If anything, the 0Z shifted a little bit further to the west. But the point is that out of all the inconsistency, out of all of the guidance, the European has remained by far the most consistent out of all of them. And at this current point, I'm riding with the European mainly because of the consistency, and the rest of the models are just going all over the place. One run they'll have it heading towards Nicaragua, the next run they'll have it heading towards the Dominican Republic, the next run they'll have it heading towards Jamaica. It's been all over the place with Invest 98L, so this is going to take some time. You're going to want to be patient with this. But I will say the European definitely, to me, is what I'm riding with, and that's mainly because of consistency and quality over quantity. So that's your European. Here's the GFS. The GFS wants the system to really ramp up in intensity and still make landfall in the Dominican Republic, which I will say as time goes on, that is becoming less and less likely, especially the further west this system ends up moving. But the GFS wants the system to make landfall near the Haiti-Dominican Republic border as a hurricane, and then kind of get really run over through the mountains right there, and really weaken, and then it starts to reemerge off the Atlantic side of Hispaniola and tries to get its act together, and it does for the most part, but it's a very large and somewhat broad type of system, 952 millibars right there for the GFS. I'm going to be honest, I don't trust the GFS. It's been pumping out the same scenario. I know it's been consistently having it heading over there, but I don't like the dynamics and I don't like the synoptics surrounding that. So that's your GFS. Here's your Canadian run. Taking a look at that, Canadian has, once again, similar to the European, the system taking its time consolidating and organizing until it gets towards the Western Atlantic. But still, the Canadian kind of has this emerging near Belize right here, and then heading towards the Cuba as a weak tropical system. By the time we get to about 10 days out or so, so about October 29th, I think it's going to be a little bit slower than that. It's going to take more time than that, but that is kind of in line with what the European is going for the most part, mainly a Western side scenario. So that's your Canadian. Here is what the icon is going for right here. I know the icon, like I've said before, and as Ian pointed out on stream last night, is pretty iconic for not being the best model and for producing some very ridiculous scenarios. But the icon has the system kind of slowly getting its act together, taking its time, not really developing until about 2.5 days out, similar to the European on October 22nd, around in the afternoon time frame. And then the system starts to slowly organize and get its act together. But the interesting part is the icon mainly stalls out. It's one of those systems that kind of stalls out just east of Jamaica and just southwest of Haiti. If that does end up happening, it's going to be bad for either Jamaica or Haiti. And I hope Haiti does not get impacted by this system if it does that, because if it does, Haiti's in pretty much a state of anarchy at this point. They do not need a major hurricane to make things even worse. We all remember what Hurricane Matthew did back in 2016. It made landfall as a 150-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane, killed hundreds of people in Haiti. It was the worst natural disaster since the 2010 earthquake that they had. So that's something that you need to keep in your back pocket as well. So ultimately, the main thing we need to kind of keep in mind is that we are seeing a lot of model wars with this, as we like to call it, and the models have just been all over the place. My best advice, nowcast it. Look at what's going on right now. Let things kind of flow as they need to, and let the models get their act together over the next couple of days. This system's not going to be impacting very many people in a very significant way for the next 48 hours or so. Yes, the ABC Islands could definitely get some rainfall from this, but other than that, there's not going to be very major impacts, at least until the system starts to get its act together. But one thing I do need to stress to you guys, and one thing that we need to kind of emphasize as well, is this system, number one, has a very high ceiling. This could be a situation where the system could blow up into a major hurricane very quickly once it develops. And number two, another thing we need to pay attention to is, regardless of where this system goes at this point, somebody is going to get impacted. There's no question in my mind that somebody is going to get impacted. The question is, who's it going to be and how strong is it going to get? And those are two glaring questions that we need to answer and get answered in probably the next 48 to 72 hours. So those are things that we're going to be watching here on the channel, and we will keep you updated here on Pat's Path Predictor. But ladies and gentlemen, we will be back with a stream tonight starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time as well. So if you want to tune in, feel free to do that. We'd really like you guys to come back on. We had really good turnout last night. Thank you for the support for that. But ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the video today. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. I'm working on a Hurricane Milton documentary that will be out at the end of the week, hopefully. So you guys will definitely want to enjoy that. I hope you guys are hyped. I hope you guys are looking forward to that, because I am very ecstatic to getting that finished. But for those of you who would like to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, as well as just, to get more engaged with weather, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that will be in the end screen. Also, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. if you haven't. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.